My name is Diane Whitfield. I'm 58 years old, and I live in a quiet suburb outside Denver, Colorado. For 32 years, I worked as a school teacher. I raised one son, alone, after my husband passed away when our boy was only 7. I gave up vacations. I gave up new clothes. I gave up almost everything so that my son, Ryan, could have a good life. I never imagined that one day, the woman my son married would stand in my own kitchen and call me a freeloader. But that's exactly what happened, and what she didn't know would change everything. If you had told me a year ago that I would sit in a courtroom listening to my daughter-in-law's lawyer try to take my home away from me, I would have laughed, because that house wasn't just where I lived. It was built on land I had owned since before my son was even born. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. When Ryan first brought Vanessa home, I was hopeful. She was smart, well-spoken, ambitious. She worked in marketing for a growing firm downtown, and she talked about her 5-year plans like they were already written in stone. I told myself, this is good for Ryan. He needs someone driven. The wedding was beautiful. Small, but beautiful. I paid for half of it myself, out of my retirement savings, because that's what mothers do. For the first year, things were fine. Vanessa was polite to me. Distant, but polite. She'd smile at family dinners, ask about my garden, compliment my cooking. I told myself the distance was just her personality. Not everyone is warm right away. I told myself to be patient. But I had no idea what was coming. It started small. A comment here, a joke there. Diane, don't you think it's time to downsize? This house is so much for one person. I laughed it off the first time. The second time, I felt a small knot form in my stomach. Then Ryan and Vanessa asked to move in with me, just for a few months, they said, while we save up for our own place. Of course I said yes. He was my son. This was his childhood home. I gave them the 2 guest rooms upstairs, and I told myself it would be temporary. 6 months became a year. A year became 18 months, and somewhere in that time, something shifted. Vanessa stopped asking permission for things. She started rearranging my furniture to make the space feel more modern. She repainted the hallway without telling me. She'd invite her friends over and introduce the house as our place. I noticed, but I stayed quiet. Because Ryan seemed happy, and I didn't want to be the difficult mother-in-law everyone warns you about. I wish I had noticed the signs sooner. One evening, I came home early from a school event. I walked into the kitchen, and I heard Vanessa on the phone with her sister. She didn't hear me come in. Honestly, once we get her to sign the house over, we won't need her permission for anything. She's basically living off us at this point anyway. I stood frozen in the doorway. Living off us? I had paid the property taxes on that house for 26 years. I had paid off the mortgage before Ryan even graduated high school. I had covered the roof repair last spring, and somehow, in Vanessa's mind, I was the one being carried. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying every small comment, every joke about downsizing, every subtle push toward the door. It wasn't affection that brought them into my home. It was a plan. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I watched Vanessa move through my house like she already owned it. She hosted a dinner party and didn't even ask if I minded. When I gently mentioned it, she rolled her eyes and said, in front of guests, Diane, you really need to stop acting like this is still your house. You're basically a freeloader here at this point. Ryan and I cover everything now. The room went quiet. My own son said nothing. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried for the first time in years, not because of the insult itself, but because of what it revealed. She genuinely believed it. She had convinced herself, and maybe even convinced my son, that I was the burden. That's when everything changed. I stopped crying, and I started thinking clearly for the first time in months. The next morning, I drove to the county records office. Not because I doubted myself, I knew exactly what I owned, but because I needed something Vanessa could not argue with. I requested a copy of the property deed. There it was, in plain black ink, my name, and only my name, listed as sole owner of the land and the home built on it. Purchased 11 years before Ryan was even born. Paid off, in full, 14 years ago. Vanessa had never once asked to see it. She had simply assumed, because I was quiet, because I was polite, because I let her redecorate my hallway without complaint, that the house belonged to them. She was wrong, and she was about to find out exactly how wrong. I made 3 copies of that deed. I placed one in my desk drawer, one in a safety deposit box, and one I folded neatly and placed in an envelope. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't interested in screaming matches. I wasn't interested in humiliating my son's wife in a fit of anger. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. So I waited for the right moment. Vanessa had been telling her friends, for weeks, that she and Ryan were planning to finally get Diane to sign the house over so they could refinance it and add a home office. She had even scheduled a meeting with a family lawyer to discuss transferring ownership responsibilities, as she called it, without ever once asking me if I agreed. That meeting became my opportunity. I called the lawyer's office myself the day before and asked to attend. Vanessa didn't know I was coming. As far as she was concerned, this would be the day she finally took control of her house. What happened next still shocks me, even now. I didn't tell Ryan what I was planning. I didn't want him to feel caught in the middle before he needed to be. Instead, I prepared quietly. I brought the original deed. I brought 11 years of property tax receipts, all under my name. I brought the paperwork from the day I paid off the mortgage, 14 years earlier, the day Ryan was still in middle school. I dressed simply, no dramatic entrance, no raised voice. I walked into that lawyer's office and sat down at the far end of the table, directly across from Vanessa. Her smile faded the moment she saw me. "Diane, I didn't realize you'd be joining us." "I own the house we're discussing," I said calmly. "I think that makes me relevant to the conversation." The lawyer, a calm and thorough woman named Ms. Alvarez, asked Vanessa to explain what she hoped to accomplish. Vanessa cleared her throat. "We're hoping to formalize ownership, since Ryan and I have been covering most of the household expenses for the past 2 years, and Diane, well, she's more of a guest at this point." Ms. Alvarez turned to me. "Mrs. Whitfield, do you have documentation of the current ownership?" I slid the folder across the table, the deed, the tax receipts, the paid-off mortgage statement. Vanessa's face went pale as she read the top line, "Sole owner Diane Whitfield since 1998. That can't be right," she said. "Ryan told me—" "Ryan," I said gently, "has never once been on this deed. Neither have you. This house is mine. It has always been mine. And no meeting, no plan, no comment about freeloading changes that fact." The room fell silent. Ryan, sitting beside his wife, looked down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. "You called me a freeloader in my own kitchen, in front of guests," I continued. "In the house I paid for alone for over 2 decades, I let that comment go because I love my son. But I will not sit quietly while you attempt to take from me what I built long before you were part of this family." The meeting ended quickly after that. There was no ownership transfer. There was no refinancing. There was only a very long, very quiet car ride home for Ryan and Vanessa. 2 weeks later, Ryan came to see me alone. He apologized, really apologized for the first time in months. He admitted he'd let things go too far, that he'd been too passive while his wife pushed me further and further to the margins of my own life. Vanessa never apologized directly, but she stopped redecorating without asking. She stopped hosting parties without permission, and she never called me a freeloader again. 6 months later, Ryan and Vanessa moved into their own place, a home they bought together, with their own names on the deed this time. My house is quiet again. It is, once more, entirely mine. I think about that day in the lawyer's office often. Not with anger anymore, with a strange kind of peace. I learned something important through all of this. Quiet dignity is not weakness. Staying calm does not mean staying silent forever. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply hand someone the truth and let them see it for themselves. I gave my son everything I had for 32 years. I never once asked him to prove his gratitude. But I will never again let anyone, not even family, convince me that what I built with my own hands belongs to someone else. If you're listening to this, and someone in your life has made you feel small in a place that is truly yours, remember this. You don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, all you need is the deed.